This is Grandmaster Boris Alterman and you're watching Gambit Guide. Welcome back to Gambit Guide, and today starts a new series of lecture about fantasy gambit in the Caro Kann defense. So after e4 and c6, in our previous course about the Caro Kann, I teach you to play after d4, d5 the Panov attack, or Botvinnik attack, how we call it, after e takes d5, c takes d5 and c4. However, there is another interesting gambit line which starts with the move f2 and f3. White is not just protecting the pawn on e4, but also ready to sacrifice immaterial in case of black going for the main variation of the fantasy gambit. So this gambit was developed, I would say, about 100 years ago by Tartakower and Marozzi. And the main idea is that after d takes e4 and f takes e4, black has just extremely dangerous resource, and to play e7, e5, counter-attacking white center instantly. In that case, white has no time for recapture the pawn after d takes e5, since queen h4 check just deadly attack white's king. And the weakness of the e1 h4 diagonal is just critical for white's king. So after queen h4, g3 and queen takes e4, white is just going to lose the rook on h1. Definitely after d takes e4, white can try and to play just simply knight c3, going into the some kind of the black Mardimer gambit, which also we studied. In that case, after e takes f3 and knight takes f3, so white would get just quite serious compensation for his sacrificed pawn. However, white could just continue f takes e4, e5, and now not to capture on e5, but to play knight f3 in the gambit style. So white is sacrificing the pawn because after e takes d4, once again, is not so great recommendation for white to capture on d4 with the knight, since once again queen h4 is very unpleasant. So white is going to lose the pawn on e4 without any compensation. The move like queen takes d4 is just simplifying too much the position, so without queens white has no any advantage, only isolated pawn on e4 could be a serious problem in the forthcoming endgame. That's why after e takes d4 we are not capturing the pawn, but continue developing our pieces and playing bishop c4, and this is the main position of the fantasy gambit. So strangely enough, from I would say quiet Caro Kann defense, we arrive to the very unbalanced position in which white is having better development, controlling the center, e4, e5 square, so bishop just posed towards the f7, which is the weakest spot in the black's position, and white is having as well semi-open f-file, and like in the king's gambit, we have just great opportunity to develop our strong attack on the king side. Let's say after bishop c4, black has a few alternatives, of course. Black can play knight f6, black can also play bishop e7, black could try also continue and playing c5, protecting his pawn on d4, and black also could play move like bishop b4 check. So it's just a few interesting examples I would like just to show you that there is quite difficult for black to play in this position. So white is having long-term initiative. However, from time to time, black is trying to contradict white's attack with the simple development moves like bishop g4. However, this is immediate, will be punished after bishop takes f7, king takes f7, and knight e5 check, and the black's bishop on g4 is gone. If in case of bishop takes f7, black is playing king e7, so once again white would continue bishop to g5 with a huge attack. So definitely bishop g4 just cannot be recommended. So you can try and ask what happened if black is just continued developing his pieces and playing bishop b4 check, so 10-pin attack on over the white's position of the king. But in that case we are going to play in the Danish gambit or Evans gambit style, ready to sacrifice one more pawn, c3. So now of course there is no point for black bishop to retreat to e7 or c5, because in that case white just simply gets a strong center control after taking the pawn. So d takes c3 is the most natural, but now white once again performing the standard combination in such a position. So white to move. What to do? So we can quite fast discover the problem in black's position, that king at the same time is the only defender of the queen on d8 and the pawn on f7. So by combining these two threats we easily find the combination bishop takes f7 check. This move looks quite dangerous, because the question, why not just simply to accept the sacrifice after king takes f7 and queen takes d8, black has the opportunity to capture on b2 with a check and threaten the rook on a1 by promoting the new queen already. However, after king e2, black is in a very dangerous position, because now, only now, it becomes clear that taking on a1 and by promoting the queen allows white to finish the game easily after knight g5 check, king g6. Now once again queen e8, so white is having just mating attack against black's king. King to h6, all the time the only moves. Knight e6 check. Queen is under threat, g5, and finally bishop takes g5. Despite the fact white is having just a rook and a piece down, black's king in the mating net and just cannot escape from it. So we can try improve black's defense. Let's see. And instead of capture on a1 with a promotion, to play knight e7, trying to counterattack and to get rid of the white's queen from d8, sacrificing the rook after queen takes h8, and only now to capture on a1 with the queen. So what happens then? Once again, check on g5. Black can't escape from the white's mating attack. King g6 and queen e8, so doesn't matter the position of the knight on g8 or e7, so black's king is still in the very bad position. King h6 only move, and once again knight e6, and there is the same checkmate is coming after g5, and then bishop takes g5, and of course this is a checkmate. So the best resource for black, of course, not to capture on f7. Let's look at it. So now white is playing bishop takes f7, and we already studied that king takes f7 is losing immediately after queen takes d8, and black's king just going to be checkmated very soon. So the best, of course, is king e7, not to accept the sacrifice. So now white has just easy choice. First of all, we can trade the queens and then to capture on c3, but I believe it's better for white is just to continue attack after queen b3, simultaneously protect the bishop on f7 and intends to capture on b4. After c takes b2 check, queen takes b4 check, king takes f7 and bishop takes b2. So white is having just very strong attack against black's uncastled queen. So we are very fast, bringing all our pieces in the game. So black's king is also under threat, like knight e5. For instance, in case of knight f6 and knight e5, black is in big trouble. Look at the position. King g8 could be made by queen b3, and black's king cannot escape. And in case of king e8, so black's king lost the castling right, and let's say white could just bring the knight to the center and to come with the rook to d1, having huge initiative. So definitely all this line is just extremely difficult for black, and was already discovered a while ago, more than 50 years ago. So let's try to improve black's play. And after e4, c6, d4, d5, f3, take on e4, f takes e4, e5, knight f3, e takes d4, bishop c4, playing maybe bishop to c5. White is continue in the gambit style, short castling. So the biggest aim for white now, of course, is the f7 pawn. So after d3 check, always we can play simply king h1, knight f6, and now white continues knight to e5, very aggressive. So after bishop e6, white continue with the attack after white to move. What is the strongest continuation in this position? Let's try to find how white can keep his attack going on. So definitely bishop takes e6 is possible to exchange, but we have knight takes f7 sacrifice. So white is winning back the pawn, at the same time destroying black's king side protection. After bishop takes f7, bishop takes f7, king takes f7, sends to the pin over the f file, we have time to bring our queen in the game. Queen h5 check, at the same time aiming the bishop on c5. For instance, after king g8 and queen takes c5, and then white is intending just to bring the bishop to g5 or to play e4, e5. It's still quite dangerous for black to capture on e4, because it's just open more pieces and more files just coming into the attack. For instance, white can play immediately queen f5, and later on to play bishop g5 after knight f6, having just enormous compensation. Let's say move like knight f6 is just losing immediately after queen e6 check, king f8, and just brings the bishop, and black is absolutely hopeless against the bishop to d6, and this is a checkmate already. In the game, black decided to capture on f7 with his king. However, check on h5, same problem. King f8, bishop takes e6, threatening the checkmate on f7. Queen e7 only move. So now white could already destroy black's position by rook takes f6. Now if queen takes f6, then bishop on c5 is gone. And if g takes f6, then bishop to h6, and the checkmate is coming very soon. So in case black is playing move like king e7, probably this is the best continuation. So white simply could just capture the pawn, and still black is in big trouble. Let's say queen d6. Black is trying to exchange everything, but takes, and now suddenly white to move. How would you finish the game here? So pawns stick like e4, e5, suddenly wins the game immediately. The problem is that after king takes e5, white can win the piece after rook e1, or just to continue the mating attack with bishop to f4, and black is just going to lose at least one more piece. After king e4, there will be knight d2 with the mating attack, and king f5, just simply white can just capture one more piece on bishop takes b8, or first to play bishop d3, and black's king just almost in the mating net. So it's quite dangerous position for black after the sacrifice, and one more game shows just very serious threat white has always in case black is accepting the gambit. So after bishop c4, in one of the game between Heberla and Jessel from Istanbul 2005 Open Tournament, black decided to answer queen c7, and after short castling, bishop to g4. So what the point of queen c7, that black is covering the f7 square. So right now white cannot play bishop takes f7 because queen captures on f7. However, even now, after bishop g4, white can continue queen d3, keeping all the threats. Knight g5, e4, e5, knight takes d4. For black is quite difficult to stop all white's aims against the f7 pawn. Bishop h5, knight g5. Knight h6, only way to protect the pawn on f7, but now white just bring more forces into the game. Bishop f4, queen d8, e5, threatening to break through the center after e5 and e6, and to open up completely the position of the black king, which is stuck in the center. b5, bishop b3, bishop e7, knight e4, threatening bishop takes h6, threatening knight f6, threatening knight d6, bishop g6. After taking on h6 and g takes h6, queen h3, so black just cannot survive this position anymore. So white is intending also to capture on h6, also to play e6, also to play knight f6. Black castled, but after knight bd2, white just decided to move his pieces out instead of capturing on h6, since still black hardly even could survive on the king side. h5, knight f6, check, bishop takes f6, rook takes f6, queen e7, queen g3. So now suddenly white has new threat to sacrifice on g6, since f7 pawn is still pinned, and just to ruin completely black's position on the king side. So exposed position of the black's king is a decisive factor here. After king h8 and knight f3, so white just got the decisive advantage. So it's threatening also knight h4, and threatening also to bring the queen to h6, and then knight g5. And the checkmate is coming very soon. At the same time, we are threatening just to bring one more rook into the game after rook f1. Move like knight d7 only loses here another pawn on c6. So white is getting just also positional, also material advantage. So let's try and look the other alternatives. So by playing bishop c4, as I explained, white is just prepares his attack against the black's king. But now bishop e7, taking more control over the g5 square. For instance, after short castling, black could play knight f6. And after knight g5, what do you say in case of what would happen in case of short castling? White to move. So this position happened in the game between Richard Teichmann and Jesse Mises from the Berlin match 1910. And here white is just quite easy, used his better pieces development and exposed position of the kings. So white to move. So here Teichmann decided the outcome with the simple knight takes f7 move. The problem is that black after rook takes f7, bishop takes f7 and king takes f7 is going to lose the full knight after e4, e5. So the powerful position of rook on f1 just brings white decisive material advantage. After king g8, e takes f6 and bishop takes f6, still the factor of unprotected position king side and fast development of all white pieces, just not giving black any compensation for this material disadvantage. Knight e2, bishop e6, knight e4. When you have material advantage, it's just always recommended for you to exchange pieces. So white is just following this important principle when black is trying to keep his two bishops by playing bishop e7, but it's only allows white to develop his attack successfully after queen h5, knight d7, and bishop to g5. As I explained, white would like to continue trading pieces, so black is just very difficult position. Let's say after bishop d5, white simply can continue rook a to e1, and there is no time for black to capture on e4, since after queen f7 check and bishop takes e7, so black is losing another bishop on e4. And after bishop takes g5, knight takes g5 and h6, knight f7, knight f6, knight takes h6, so black resigned. Doesn't help for black also move like queen a5, look at the position. Trying to counterattack since white's bishop on g5 is pinned right now, the queen on h5 is hanging. However, queen h4, so continue the thread of trading the pieces, bishop f8, bishop d2, now the new thread is knight g5 is coming. Queen d5, knight g5, bishop f5, c4, for destruction from of the queen from the d5 square, force black to improve position of white bishop from d2 to c3, and after bishop g6, once again here is no any compensation for black. White is having better pieces development and a lot of open files for rooks. Rook a to d1, queen c5, king h1, so now black has to take care of knight on d7, and after knight b6 and knight e6, queen h5. Teichmann finished the game with a nice rook d8 move, and there is no way to stop the checkmate over the back rank after queen takes h4 and rook f1 takes f8 and checkmate. So once again, in the fantasy gambit, there is extremely dangerous position for black, and it's not so easy to stop white's initiative and white's attack in the center and on the king side. In our second part, I would like to take your more attention to the situation when black is not accepting the direct way, the fantasy gambit, but trying to play solid. It means that after f3. So what happens if black is not accepting the sacrifice but trying to play or e6 or knight f6 or some other moves. If you have any question about the fantasy gambit or any other gambit, you can leave me a message on ICC, and for rest of my lectures about the gambit, just follow www.chess.fm. Thanks for watching. See you next time.